Hello, boys and girls. I'm Silo. This is Bob. Bob is here to keep me on track. It is currently the end of the year 2020. We're in December. I'm up in the Northeast at the moment, and there's snow out in the surrounding areas. And as I reflect back on the year 2020, I have to admit there was one thing that came out of the year 2020 that will be a very, very good thing. And that was the creation of the United States Space Force, the USSF. Donald Trump signed into existence this year the United States Space Force, and it is a member of the military branch of the United States. And I was talking with a colleague of mine, an associate I know, and we were talking about many things, and I brought up the USSF, and I said, you better watch it. We now have a Space Force, and we're going to be chasing after you soon. And he laughed. And he said, you know, believe it or not, there's a reason why the USSF has come into existence. And I said, so they can control the massive interstellar fleet that we have of spaceships that are exploring the universe? And he laughed again. He goes, no, because we needed a traffic cop. And I said, what? And he said, we needed a traffic cop. We have flights that are going in and out from the Earth every single day. And so we went to a handful of the countries that are dealing with space around here. And every single space station, satellite, everything that observes the heavens has either a test mode or an on-off mode, or they basically can turn off their cameras for a certain time period, at a certain date, at a certain time, so the cameras are turned completely off and they're not recording anything. And he said, we went to the countries that mainly control your space. We went to Russia, China, Britain, France, Israel, and the United States. And we basically evenly divided it up. And we would go to each of those countries and we would say, they also consider the Asian Space Force to be a Space Force, but it's a looser configuration for some reason. But anyway, he said, we went to those organizations and we said, we need you to process these requests when we make them. We are going to request that you turn off all cameras and all recording devices and shut down everything at certain dates, at certain times, for a certain amount of times. And we'll contact you, we'll let you know when and where, and then we need you to go ahead and process this. And he said the results were just not what we wanted. The French were laissez-faire about it. They would be sent a message saying, we need it shut down at certain date, time, for a certain amount of time. And the daily list of tasks that would come from the French Space Force, it might be numbered 17 or 18 or 19 on the list. And we went to him, we said, no, you don't understand. When we're scheduling that we need your cameras to go down, it's not 17, 18, and 19. It's 1, 2, and 3. Well, we have other things that we are doing. It doesn't matter. When we say that we need your cameras turned off on a date and time for a certain amount of time period, you might want to put that at the top of your schedule. And they were very laissez-faire about it. Britain, he said that Britain had so much red tape you would not believe it. They would send out a request for a certain time and date to be blocked out on all the cameras. And the person taking the request would have to get the approval of his supervisor, who would have to get the approval of his supervisor, all the way up the chain of command, and then it would have to make it back down the chain of command to the guy who actually pulled the plug, and then he might or might not do it. There was just so much red tape in getting these things approved, and believe it or not, he said, sometimes they'd come back to us and say, why? This is not a why situation. We want your cameras and recording devices turned off, and there is no why to be asked. He said the Russians were even worse. The Russians were so screwed up that, yes, they might issue the command to turn off the cameras and the recording devices 3 or 4 days after the event was supposed to take place. There was just little chain of command, there was a little procedure that put this stuff into place, and then someone somewhere would remember, whoops, we forgot to turn off the cameras. And no one likes Israel. When Israel would issue the command, no one would like Israel, and they would basically ignore whatever Israel was telling them. And the Chinese, he said, the Chinese were the worst of all. We actually discovered that the people that we were contacting in the Chinese Space Agency were turning on more cameras and more recording devices to record whatever the event that we wanted blacked out, to record more of it so they could try and steal our secrets. He said there are several previously high executives in the Chinese government, in the Chinese Space Agency, who disappeared. They completely vanished, and they're pushing brooms someplace on the dark side of the moon or on Mars someplace. But they are no longer on this planet. And he said, luckily China has such a government that when people disappear, nobody asks questions. Li Xing is not here. Li Xing disappeared. Carry on. Find someone to do Li Xing's events. And then there was the United States. And he said, not only would the United States do everything that we asked, they would double check with us as to what the time and dates were. They would put into effect the blackouts as we requested them. They would monitor the blackouts while they were occurring. And then after the blackout, they would come to us and ask us whether or not we were satisfied with the event. It was incredible. There were some people that I work with who honestly thought, usually we can give you a day's worth of warning. Sometimes we can only give you an hour's worth of warning. But he said there were times when some of the people that I work with honestly thought that if we contacted the United States and asked them to do a blackout in 30 minutes, that you guys would be able to do so. He said the few times that they ever had to do a blackout on sudden notice, the only times that the cameras caught things was when there was something that was scheduled at that time that was completely unavoidable. You may have seen a couple of spacewalks, videos from spacewalks, where there's a light in the background coming from the planet Earth that zooms off. That's because those spacewalks were planned meticulously a day or so ahead of time, and they simply could not move everything around to shut down the cameras. But he said that the United States was doing such a good job that they got together and they decided to offer the United States a chance to be the sole person that we contact to tell Earth to shut off its cameras and its recording devices during such and such a day at such and such a time for this region of the Earth. And that, if you look in the charter for the USS Space Force, the United States Space Force, if you look deep, deep, deep down into its charter, you will discover that there is a spot in the charter for the USSF that states that the United States has the ability to tell every single country to turn off its recording devices at a certain date, at a certain time, for a certain duration. And that our people communicate with someone at the USSF and they say, this is what we need, and someone from the United States takes care of it. And he said, you guys are doing a very impressive job with this. We are really, really satisfied. And I said, well, that's nice, but I didn't realize that you guys were so heavily involved with the way things are going here. And he said, we're really not. We're hands off. We're very, very hands off. We've had this discussion before. And he repeated the points that they're very hands off. They don't want to get involved. But he said, there is one thing that happens because we're here and because we're looking to see what's happening around here. And that is when we show up to observe certain things, it clues in the government of whatever area that we're exploring, that whatever we're observing has a greater impact than what they may have thought. And it's only a slight nudge. It's just a, UFO activity is quite heavy in this region during this period of time. Or, we've noticed some people who we suspect may not necessarily be from this part of the country who are hanging around this location at this time for some reason. And he said, when we are upset, like with China or some of these other countries, we'll stop noting the important events. The UFOs won't fly over the significant areas that could use a little bit of a boost. And those countries no longer get the benefits of our curiosity. Well, what about the people on your side who contact you and want it instantly done? He goes, we have ways of handling them too. We have ways of showing our displeasure about people who come to this planet, because this is no longer an option area. This is a requested location. This is a place where you have to get permissions to come and to be here. This is no longer just a show up and see what's happening place. And I said, because we're not yet ready to travel in space, right? And he looked at me, he leaned forward and he said, Nancy Pelosi, Joe Biden, Barack Obama. As long as you have people like that as your leadership, humans will not be ready for the great experiences. Yes, it is true. There might be one or two human beings who deserve a chance to go out and see all the magnificent wonders that exist in space. But as a group, until humanity has fewer of the people that I just mentioned, you aren't ready for space. There's a lot of people you're going to encounter when you head out there. And you can't head out there having a Nancy Pelosi, a Joe Biden, and a Barack Obama as your leaderships. You haven't hit me once yet today, Bob. 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 I was saying, Bob, you didn't hit me once during that presentation.
Bob was asleep. Bob had a busy night.
Asleep? You were asleep? What were you doing all night that kept you up so late?
Saving the Earth from invading lizard men.
Saving the Earth from lizardmen. Oh well. My name is Silo. That's Bob. My name is Silo. And those are my words.